Most people, when given the opportunity to help someone else at no cost or penalty to themselves, do it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Blam Blam Truckers. I'm Bees. That's Bees. I'm
Really?
Buse.
Your bees? Again?
Again, every day. Every day
Identity
except
crisis
for
here at
today.
Blam Blam Truckers. So, today we're going to be talking about, to continue on our Superman theme here, what makes a great Superman story. Because last time we talked about why people can't write good Superman stories. So, today we wanted to talk about what makes a great Superman story, because there's a difference. All right, so Superman is a stand-in for everybody, for every man, every woman, every child. The question you should be asking yourself when you're writing a good Superman story is, what would I do with those powers? If I had those powers, how would I live my life? What would I do? What would change? What would be the same? And that should be the baseline for your Superman stories is what would the average person or anyone do with those powers? And some people are obviously going to abuse them, and that does actually make some pretty good Superman stories. But some people, most people, would eventually, I think we'd all have a period of just going out and using our powers to do crazy zany things and make ourselves lots of money, either by creating diamonds or digging up using our X-ray vision to find gold in the ground, and then engaging in hedonistic pursuits for a little while, maybe a month, maybe a year. I'm guessing a couple of months, and you'd be bored with hedonism. Maybe some people might take a year, but eventually, most people are going to come back to, I can help people. And that's really what they're going to end up doing with those powers, because most people, when given the opportunity to help someone else at no cost or penalty to themselves, do it. If you see somebody stuck on the side of the road, I don't know about you guys out there, but I always give them a 911 call especially if I don't have time to, because I'm usually not just driving for fun, not with today's gas prices. So I'm usually going somewhere when I'm driving, like work, and I don't have time to stop. So, while back in the day, if I was taking a pleasure cruise, I would stop and help them change a tire or figure out what the problem is with their engine or whatever. Nowadays, I just give a call to 911 while I'm driving. Hands free, folks. Hands free. Be safe. Don't hit
Yep.
anything. Um, but yeah, we get I can't tell you how many times people have gotten lost in the woods when they go out hiking, and hundreds of people turn up to help find those lost hikers. If you see somebody struggling while they're swimming, you dive in and you help them out. If you know how to swim, that is, you don't put yourself in danger. And that's pretty much who Superman is, really. He has these powers. It's sometimes it is an inconvenience for him to help people, but most of the time it isn't. He's got enough power that going out and helping someone who's in trouble, it's easy for him, and he wants to do it because we all want to do it. And without understanding that was really the point I was driving at, or one of the points I was driving at last time. But you need that as a baseline for what actually makes a good Superman story. So there's only three kinds of conflict. And for those of us who are out of school, harken back to high school, English class 101. There are three types of conflict: man versus man nature, and man versus himself. That's it. And Superman generally, and now there's a difference between a Superman movie and a Superman serial, like an ongoing story, not, Captain Crunch. But in a Superman serial, in an ongoing series, like a comic book or a TV show, you get to explore a lot of these different things. Uh, Lois and Clark did a fantastic job exploring those three different kinds of conflicts. I haven't watched Superman and Lois, but I hear it's good. I did watch my Adventures with Superman, or most of it, whatever's on HBO Max right now. I've watched,
Mm-hmm.
and that was good. Yeah,
Superman animated series.
Superman the animated series. I watched all of Smallville.
Some
I
of it was good.
enjoyed a lot of it. It's so the difference with Smallville is not a Superman story. It's a Clark Kent story.
Mhm.
And it's also, the audience is very different than most of those other Superman stories. The audience for Smallville was,
It was a teen
um,
drama.
yeah, teenagers and young adults. That was really one of their target audiences, and because it was that, there was a lot more romantic angles in it, and frankly, the story quality wasn't quite as high. I like to call the first 2 seasons "There's Something About Lana," because people would get superpowers from the kryptonite, and then they'd go chasing Lana Lang. Go watch the series; it was enjoyable. I think it still holds up pretty well. I've enjoyed watching it on Hulu, though I'm only in season 2. But again, it deals with the same. It has a lot of the same flaws that series of that type do. The love triangle that takes forever to end. Um, there's more emphasis on that than a normal Superman series. When a normal Superman series is about being Superman and enjoying the adventures he goes on and escaping through the fantasy of having his powers. So when it comes to conflict, when you're writing a series, you're going to explore all 3 of those. You're going to do the man versus nature, man versus another man who's an equal or threat of some sort, and man versus himself. And frankly, the most compelling stories, something the Marvel Cinematic Universe has figured out, is the man versus himself stories. And I'm going to prove that real quick with a quick question to my good friend and co-trucker, Buse. All right, Buse. Name 5 great MCU villains.
5
Emphasis on great.
great MCU villains.
5 of them.
Oh, Thanos from Infinity War.
I'll give you Thanos. I'll give you one Thanos. You can't say Thanos from a bunch of different movies. I'll give you Thanos.
Well, no. The reason I say Thanos from Infinity War, because that was where he was a great villain. I didn't think he was as great a villain in Endgame, and before that he was just whatever.
That's fair. He was there. He just, yeah. I'm with you.
Jeff. I actually thought Jeff Bridges in Iron Man 1.
Obadiah Stane.
Obadiah Stane. There we go.
Can't remember the villain's name, but yeah, he did a great job.
So that I'm actually going to go with the not Mandarin, actual Mandarin from Shang-Chi, because I actually thought he was a great villain, my personal opinion.
All right.
One day later.
And that might be pretty much it. I can make
How is Loki not in your top 2?
Because I don't consider him a villain. He was a villain, don't get me wrong. But the problem is, Loki...
Purpose.
The only time Loki was the main villain was in Thor 1, and I felt that Thor 1...
Avengers.
Yes, he was
where
the main
he killed
villain.
Hundreds of thousands of people.
Yes, but he was not the...
He may not have been the driving force, but he was definitely on the side of evil.
He was, but...
He planned the New York attack, he killed those people, killed lots of people.
He's just so likable.
He is. That's one of the things that makes him a great villain.
I will give you him. The only other person who I rank high and I like him, but I don't count him almost as great, but I would be Ego. I actually thought Ego was a pretty decent villain.
Now, to be fair here, all you truckers out there, we are not saying that other bad guys didn't give amazing acting performances, because they did. We're looking for actual villainous, like a great villain, a great adversary. The character itself, not the performance, because I don't want to take away from any of these actors' performances. I think most of them did excellent jobs. I'm having a hard time thinking of someone who didn't do a good job, so we're going to let that go. Personally, I only rate 2 great villains, 2.5 with Obadiah Stane. That's Thanos and Loki. That's why I asked for 5. And that just goes to show that the most successful series of movies ever made in the history of the film so far, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, did not rely on the man versus man conflict. They relied on man versus himself. They clearly didn't rely on man versus nature, because name one time these heroes went out and fought a force of nature.
And when we talk about man versus man, I mean, heck, I consider Thor 1 more a man versus man story. It was Thor...
Man versus himself or man versus man?
Not man versus man. Man versus himself. That's what I meant. Thank you. Man versus himself, because literally the entire plot of Thor was Thor becoming worthy.
Mm-hmm. And worthiness, by the way, was putting Asgard and the Nine Realms ahead of himself and putting his life on the line to defend and protect Asgard from threats both, and the Nine Realms from threats both foreign and domestic. Odin makes that very clear in his speech, and Thor was not ready for that. In fact, Thor would actually be considered an eternal threat at the beginning of the movie. Of course, what's not said...
Everlasting threat, not eternal as in the characters.
Internal.
Internal threat. Oh, see, I thought you said eternal threat. I'm like, no. Well, I know he's going to live a long time.
No, internal. He's a domestic threat because he's a threat to the peace of the Nine Realms. What Odin isn't telling us, because I don't even know if the director or even the writers knew it at the time, is that the Nine Realms are where the Infinity Gems are hidden, all except for two. And the reason that Odin retreated to the Nine Realms was in part to protect the Infinity Stones, because we know he was an intergalactic conqueror in his past when him and Hela were running around. But most of the Infinity Stones, the gems, were hidden in the Nine Realms, mostly on Earth. The one planet in the Nine Realms that people are like, why is this even in part of the Nine Realms? They can't even defend themselves. They're just a bunch of low technology sapiens. Interesting plot. I don't know if they planned it from the beginning, but it ended up being lots of little things to find in the MCU.
We could do a whole episode on this, because you and I have been talking about this realistically since Avengers 1.
Mm-hmm.
And more so after Doctor Strange. Yeah. Doctor Strange, when they revealed the Time Stone. But anyways, back to Superman.
When they unveiled that they were doing the Infinity Stones, I think that was in, Thor 2? I don't know.
Yeah.
Or Age of Ultron? It doesn't matter. So, Superman, who we're talking about here. The best Superman stories are... This isn't 100% true. There's 80 years of Superman stories going multimedia here. But a lot of the great Superman stories are Superman is man versus himself. It's Superman versus his internal conflicts. Not that he has a lot of them, but as he's becoming Superman, the conflicts that really arise are, does he save the world or does he save someone close to him? They're conflicts we see a lot in superhero movies anyway, like saving Lois Lane versus, is that the cat?
That was my wife giving me food.
Well, that was nice of her. So that's really where you need a lot of the focus when you're doing serials, is because they're also stories that build on each other. And as they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the conflict of man versus man is not a driving conflict. Like when I'm watching Criminal Minds or NCIS, as much as I love the story of the week, whoever the villain of the week is, and sometimes it's a two-parter. What I'm really interested in is the relationships and the growth of the characters that are the detectives in those police procedurals, or the rookie. More invested in the characters than I am in the villains. Even the long-term villains that take, a couple of seasons to finish that big plot, that overarching plot. It's really the growth of the characters that you get invested in when you're telling serial stories. Movies are different. Movies can be a one-shot. Movies can be serialistic, like the MCU or Star Trek. And to a lesser degree, Star Wars. Star Wars is really a couple of trilogies, which are three. They're designed to be one story told in three parts. But when you're doing it in a movie, if you're not going for a serial storytelling, that's when something like man versus man or man versus nature, but it's Superman, so it's really finding a good opponent for him becomes important. Somebody like Mongol or um, Darkseid or Metallo, who is a threat because he has kryptonite in his chest. Having him fight somebody like Titano, who's a giant, chimp, is a good comic book story and a good story in a serial setting. But Titano is not the kind of threat that's going to draw in the audience. So you need both when you're making a movie for Superman. You need both a man versus man threat or a man versus nature threat, though those tend to not be as exciting when you're dealing with Superman. I saw The Perfect Storm, okay? Man versus nature is compelling. It's very compelling when done well. Or that movie where Ashton Kutcher had to chew his arm off. You remember that one? Got in a rocking accident and he was stuck and he had to cut off his own arm.
Oh, I don't think so.
Anyway, man versus nature can be a very compelling thing, but that's not really a Superman style story for the big screen. You want a good villain in there, but again, the main story should be something about what he's going through, what Clark is being challenged with. His relationship with Jimmy, his relationship with Perry, his relationship with Lois. That's what you're trying to build. That's what your focus should be on, that to some degree. And his decision, if you're doing a first Superman movie, the decision to put his life on the line, the decision, the constant choice to hide his identity because he knows that the people he's dealing with, fighting, the villains he's fighting, would not hesitate to kill people that are close to him and imperil people that are close to him. That should definitely be in the first movie if there's only going to be one. But it's also who he's becoming, who he's growing, the choices, the same choices that you and I would face in those situations, so that we as an audience can identify with Superman. Because that's really where the meat and potatoes, that's what's going to draw people in is, you know what? I understand what he's going through. I would do the same thing. Or sometimes it's even better when you go, I would do that completely different, because no two people handle the same thing exactly the same way. And that gives you opportunities to meet up with your buddies, like me and Views, and argue about how he handled it and what would you do and what are you going to do? So,
or play in a superhero RPG, and then you can definitely see what each person would do.
Yeah, we know about that too. So that's how you
Destroy
write
half
a good.
of Miami.
You destroyed a neighborhood. You haven't destroyed half of Miami.
You wouldn't know that from the other characters in the game. Anyways,
I have to give it to our players on that they are reacting they're doing a great job. You guys are all doing a great job.
Yeah,
But
they're reacting very, very human-like.
I was going to say realistically, but I think verisimilitude is the right word, and I don't know how to conjugate it to, or conjugate's the wrong term, but I don't know how to change that into an adverb. Yeah.
Oh, whatever.
They're reacting with great verisimilitude. So yeah, nobody has, in our RPG that we're talking about here, no one has ever seen a superhero or a superhuman before, and so people are reacting to that. But that's how you write a great Superman story, is you start with, you need to focus on his internal struggles, and not just him, but the peril that other people are in. If you want to put something on the big screen and have people feel drawn to it, that's what you have to do. And you can see in the latest superhero movies, going all the way back to Superman Returns with Brandon Routh, they have not done that very well, unfortunately. In Brandon Routh, the only struggle we see him really struggling with internally is that he had a child.
Full of kryptonite? Oh, that too.
That's man versus nature right there. That was kind of boring. No offense, guys, but not one of my favorites.
I only saw that movie once in the theater. IMAX.
Yeah. So, yeah. You want to start with his internal struggle. You want to build from that. You want to have some kind of conflict for him to be going through, something that the everyman can identify with, because I can't identify with being able to rip steel open with my bare hands. I'd like to be able to. And there's going to be some of that with the escapism aspect of the movie, but the real focus needs to be on who he is and challenges in his it's going to be on Clark Kent more than on whatever. And have a good villain for him to face. Have somebody who's powerful, who's actually a real threat. Like if you're doing a trilogy, the first threat should be somebody with kryptonite, and then you never have to deal with kryptonite again after that. Or maybe it's mentioned in passing, but there should only be one of those movies should deal with somebody with kryptonite. That's my opinion.
I actually think the final end bad guy for Man of Steel would have been better if it. I understand what they were trying to do, but I really feel like Zod would have been a much better bad guy in a sequel than in the first movie.
I can't disagree with that. Also, the guy they hired to play Lex Luthor, they originally hired to play the Joker, and he asked if he
Riddler.
could just Riddler.
Riddler.
Was it Riddler?
It was Riddler. I'm
He was a Batman
99.99%. Yeah.
Whatever it was.
But then they
let him
changed
keep
it.
the same mannerisms.
Mannerisms, yep.
Yeah. So.
Just like Clark Kent, you should like, share, and subscribe.
we're doing the begging now, are we? Please
Just
don't make
a
us
little
into mendicants. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends. We like you, truckers. I hope you like us too.
Have a good one, everybody.
Keep trucking.